The galactic community wasn't exactly the sleek, efficient operation that humanity's science fiction had predicted. In fact, it operated with all the swift decision-making of a DMV staffed exclusively by sloths. Forms were filed in triplicate, meetings were scheduled to discuss the scheduling of other meetings, and important decisions were postponed until everyone forgot why they mattered in the first place. At the heart of this cosmic bureaucracy sat the Galactic Threat Assessment Bureau, or GTAB, as the cool kids called it. Not that there were many cool kids in GTAB. It was mostly filled with beings who found color-coding spreadsheets to be the highlight of their rotation cycle. Humanity had stumbled onto the galactic stage about 3 standard cycles ago, after accidentally picking up a distress beacon with a modified pizza delivery drone. First contact was less take me to your leader and more sorry we crashed into your satellite. Do you have insurance? But somehow, Earth had secured provisional membership in the community, despite being what most species considered barely evolved apes with delusions of grandeur. Vex Tor was a mid-level analyst at GTAB, with 3 eye stalks, a semi-translucent exoskeleton, and the kind of ambition that was generally frowned upon in bureaucratic circles. His species, the Vexillians, were known for their methodical approach to everything from food consumption to mating rituals, which, coincidentally, involved similar paperwork. Another day, another data dump, Vex Tor muttered, his vocal sac deflating with a whistle as he settled into his work pod. His assignment was simple: categorize non-sentient Earth species into threat levels. So far, he'd classified most as harmless, except for something called a honey badger, which he'd tentatively marked as potentially vindictive. As he scrolled through the data feed, he noticed something odd. There was a file labeled Earth Historical Conflicts, mistakenly dumped into his wildlife assessment queue. With a curious twitch of his left eye stalk, Vex Tor opened it. "Well, that can't be right," he said, antenna vibrating in confusion. According to the file, humans had engaged in something called world wars. Not just one, but 2. And they hadn't even achieved faster than light travel before trying to destroy themselves. Twice. Vex Tor's third eye stalk extended fully the Vexillian equivalent of raising an eyebrow. This required further investigation. He glanced around the office pod farm. Nobody was paying attention. Perfect time for some unauthorized research. 3 hours and 17 bathroom breaks later, Vex Tor didn't actually need to use the facilities. It was just the only place without surveillance. He had compiled enough information to make his exoskeleton pale to a sickly beige. Humans weren't just accident-prone primates with a knack for reality TV and processed cheese. They were strategists. Calculating, deliberate. Their military history wasn't a series of instinctive responses like most emerging species exhibited. No, humans had developed something called tactics. They anticipated moves. They sacrificed smaller objectives for larger goals. They practiced deception, feints, and psychological warfare. They play games about it. Vex Tor whispered to himself, his mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. Games. For entertainment. He had discovered references to something called chess, a simulation of warfare that humans taught to their larvae, and poker training in deception and resource management disguised as recreation. Most disturbing of all was something called Risk, which was literally about global domination. The galactic community had completely misclassified humans. They weren't bumbling newcomers who had lucked their way into space travel. They were calculating killers who somehow managed to avoid killing themselves long enough to reach the stars. Vex Tor's career instincts told him to file a report and let his supervisors handle it. But his curiosity, a trait that had kept him stuck in mid-level analysis for 3 promotion cycles, won out. According to the database, there was a human liaison officer stationed at GTAB. Perhaps a direct approach would yield more information. The decision was reckless, potentially career-ending, and definitely violated at least 7 interdepartmental communication protocols. Vex Tor sent the meeting request anyway. Jack Daniels, and yes, he'd heard all the jokes about his name, was getting comfortable in his new role as human liaison to the Galactic Threat Assessment Bureau. The job mostly involved explaining that no, humans couldn't shoot lasers from their eyes, and yes, they really did need to sleep for approximately a third of their lives. When he received a meeting request from a Vexillian analyst about Earth strategic capabilities, he figured it was another question about why humans built so many different weapons when one good acid spit would suffice. He was not prepared for the trembling, pale beige alien who hustled him into a conference pod. Is it true that human children compete in strategic warfare simulations? Vextor demanded without preamble. Jack blinked. You mean like capture the flag? Yeah, I guess kids play that at summer camp. No. Vextor's eye stalks quivered anxiously. Chess. Poker. The Risk. Oh, Jack laughed. Board games? Sure, lots of people play those. I was state chess champion in high school, not that it impressed anyone at prom. Vextor's exoskeleton made a sound like knuckles cracking. You were a champion war simulator as a juvenile? Were you being groomed for military leadership? What? No, I just liked playing. It's fun. Fun. Vextor repeated, as if learning a new and possibly obscene word. You find simulating the violent demise of your opponents fun? Jack sighed. This wasn't the first cultural misunderstanding he'd navigated. Look, it's not about violence. It's about the challenge, the strategy. Strategy. Vextor's vocal sac inflated with excitement. Yes, that's what concerns me. Your species has an abnormal preoccupation with planning multiple moves ahead, with anticipating responses, with deception and misdirection. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds pretty bad, Jack admitted. But it's not like we're plotting to take over the galaxy or anything. Ding. The look of horror that passed over Vextor's face made Jack realize he'd said exactly the wrong thing. But you could be, Vextor whispered. The capacity is there. Before Jack could respond, Vextor had summoned 3 other aliens into the conference pod. One was a floating gas bag with tentacles, another resembled a sentient piece of coral, and the third looked disconcertingly like a flamingo wearing a spacesuit. Explain to them about the Risk, Vextor demanded. For the next hour, Jack found himself explaining the rules of various board games, military tactics from Earth's history, and even sports strategies. With each explanation, the aliens' reactions ranged from confusion to outright fear. You execute these plays in your recreational competitions? Asked the flamingo-like alien, whose name sounded like someone gargling mouthwash. Well, yeah, Jack said. That's how you win. By anticipating your opponent's actions and countering them before they occur, the gas bag translated. That's kind of the definition of strategy, yeah. The coral alien made a sound like breaking glass. Jack had been told that was their version of hyperventilating. But most species don't think this way, Vextor explained. They most react instinctively. They don't calculate. Jack was beginning to understand the problem. Are you saying that most aliens don't plan ahead? 4 sets of alien eyes, or sensory organs, stared at him in a way that suggested he'd just admitted to eating babies for breakfast. Oh boy, Jack sighed. I think we might have a situation here. The report wasn't supposed to leak. Vextor had marked it confidential level 7, which in GTAB terms meant it would be ignored by everyone except the most desperate for promotion. Unfortunately, he'd forgotten one crucial detail. He'd used the shared break room printer. 3 days later, the Galactic Security Council, a body that normally spent its time approving standardized docking bay dimensions, was in an uproar. The humans must be contained, shrieked Delegate Plix, a hive-mind insectoid whose 16 bodies were all gesticulating wildly. They're deceptively strategic primates. We've been deceived by their bumbling exterior, agreed Ambassador Zorn, who resembled a sapient waterfall. All those accidental first contact incidents were calculated. They were assessing our responses. Across the galaxy, news feeds lit up with panicked headlines. Humans cute but calculating. The strategic ape threat, what you need to know. Top 10 signs your human colleague is plotting something. On 17 planets, anti-human protests broke out, though most protesters were unclear on what humans actually looked like, resulting in several unfortunate incidents involving hairless pets. Jack Daniels was summoned to an emergency meeting with his superiors at the Earth Embassy. "What did you do?" demanded Ambassador Patricia West, not looking up from the 17 emergency messages flashing on her screen. "I may have explained chess to some aliens," Jack admitted. "Chess," the ambassador repeated flatly. "You explained chess, and now half the galaxy thinks we're strategic masterminds plotting their demise. In my defense, they're really bad at strategy. Apparently, most species just react to things. They don't plan ahead." The ambassador pinched the bridge of her nose. "So we're the only species that understands the concept of if I do X, they'll probably do Y." "Pretty much. And now they're terrified of us. Or like they're having an existential crisis about it." Ambassador West sighed deeply. "The Galactic Security Council has called an emergency summit. They want a human representative to explain our strategic capabilities. I'm guessing saying it's just a game didn't work. About as well as we come in peace worked for those aliens who landed in that military base." Jack winced at the memory of that particular diplomatic incident. "So who are we sending?" "Commander Elena Rodriguez." Jack nearly choked. "The Elena Rodriguez? Chess grandmaster turned military strategist? The woman who wrote Checkmate, From Board to Battlefield. The Council wants to understand human strategy." "We're sending our best strategist," Ambassador West said with a slight smile. "Let's hope she doesn't scare them any further." The Galactic Security Council chamber was designed to accommodate beings of all shapes, sizes, and atmospheric requirements. Today, it resembled nothing so much as a cosmic panic room. Commander Elena Rodriguez strode to the central podium, her military uniform crisp, her expression neutral. At 53, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a severe bun, she had the look of someone who could organize a dinner party or a naval invasion with equal efficiency. "Representatives of the galactic community," she began, her voice calm and measured. "I understand there are concerns about humanity's strategic capabilities." A murmur rippled through the chamber, translators working overtime to convert the various squawks, burbles, and telepathic broadcasts. "Let me be clear," Rodriguez continued. "Yes, humans plan ahead. Yes, we anticipate possible futures and prepare for them. Yes, we sometimes engage in misdirection. These are natural outgrowths of our evolutionary history." "Natural?" shrieked Delegate Plix. "There is nothing natural about simulating conflict for entertainment." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Is there not? Any species engage in play that simulates survival skills. Our strategic thinking is simply another adaptation." "But you teach it to your young," protested Ambassador Zorn, rippling indignantly. "You systematically train them in tactical thinking." "We also teach them to share and not to bite," Rodriguez replied dryly. "Education covers many areas." For the next hour, Rodriguez patiently explained the basics of human strategic thinking, from its evolutionary origins to its modern applications. She demonstrated a simple chess game, explained the concept of win-win negotiations, and even touched on game theory. "The point," she concluded, "is that strategic thinking isn't inherently aggressive. It's a tool like any other. It can be used for cooperation as easily as competition." There was a long silence in the chamber. Finally, a being that resembled an ambulatory Venus flytrap spoke. "But if you are capable of such calculation, how do we know you aren't planning to dominate us all?" Rodriguez smiled slightly. "Because it wouldn't be strategic. Cooperation is more beneficial than conquest. Any decent chess player knows that sometimes the best move is the one that helps both players advance." Another silence, longer this time. "Besides," Rodriguez added, "if we were planning galactic domination, would we tell you about our strategic capabilities, or would we keep them hidden?" This seemed to reassure and terrify the delegates in equal measure. "What the commander means," interjected Ambassador West, stepping up to the podium, "is that humanity values its place in the galactic community. We're not plotting anything except perhaps better trade agreements and cultural exchanges." "Exactly," Rodriguez nodded. though I wouldn't mind some better parking arrangements at the embassy. The joke fell flat, possibly because 30% of the delegates had no concept of parking. In conclusion, Rodriguez said, humanity's strategic thinking is not a threat but a potential asset to the community. We are prepared, not predatory. As the summit adjourned, Ambassador West leaned over to Rodriguez. That went well, I think. Phase 1 accomplished. Rodriguez replied with a wink. West elbowed her sharply. Not helping, Commander. 3 months after what humans had dubbed the Great Chess Panic, things had largely returned to normal in the galactic community. Well, a new normal. Vextor, far from being demoted for his unauthorized investigation, had been promoted to a newly created position, Human Cultural Liaison. His office was now decorated with chess sets, Monopoly boards, and a dartboard that many aliens found disturbingly weapon-like. The key difference, Vextor explained to a group of visiting dignitaries, is that humans don't just react to threats, they anticipate them. But predators, hissed one visitor nervously. More like gardeners, Vextor corrected, using an analogy Commander Rodriguez had suggested. They plant seeds knowing what will grow. Say, they plan for seasons that haven't arrived yet. The panic had subsided as species throughout the galaxy realized that if humans had wanted to conquer them, they probably would have made their move before announcing their strategic capabilities to everyone. What no one had anticipated, ironically enough, was how quickly other species would become interested in learning human strategic thinking. Jack Daniels found himself running weekly chess clubs at the Earth Embassy, with waiting lists hundreds of names long. Commander Rodriguez had published a galactic bestseller titled Strategic Thinking for Non-Strategic Species, which had been translated into 342 languages, including 3 that consisted entirely of scent markers. I never thought I'd be teaching a gas-based lifeform to play checkers, Jack remarked to Vextor as they watched a particularly intense match between a human child and a being that resembled a glowing jellyfish. The community is adapting. Vextor agreed, though some species are naturally better at strategy than others. It turned out that the flamingo-like aliens were particularly adept at chess, while the insectoid hive minds excelled at games requiring cooperation. The gas bags were terrible at most board games but unbeatable at poker. Their lack of facial features made them impossible to read. You know what the real irony is? Jack said, watching as the jellyfish triumphantly captured the child's last checker. For all our supposed strategic genius, we never saw this coming. Saw what coming? That teaching aliens to think strategically would become humanity's greatest contribution to the galactic community. Vextor's eye stalks quivered with amusement, perhaps. Or perhaps this was your strategy all along. Jack laughed. Now you're thinking like a human. As they walked through the embassy gardens, a group of aliens huddled over what appeared to be a risk board, arguing intensely about the strategic importance of Kamchatka. Ambassador West is thinking of organizing an interspecies strategic competition next cycle, Jack mentioned. Sort of an Olympic Games for the mind. Fascinating, Vextor replied. And which species do you think will win? Jack smiled mysteriously. That, my friend, would be telling. But I will say this: humanity might have invented these games, but we're quickly discovering we're not necessarily the best at them. A calculated response, Vextor noted approvingly, as they passed the board game group. Jack couldn't help noticing that the alien currently dominating the risk board was using a classic pincer movement that would have made Alexander the Great proud. Some lessons, it seemed, were being learned all too well. Just promise me one thing, Jack said suddenly. What's that? What's that? If the gas bags ever suggest a poker night, say no. Trust me on this one. Vextor's vocal sac inflated with laughter. Now who's thinking strategically?